I think we ought to get started and welcome our audience and welcome our guests here to Morning Fuel. Today, we've got Heather Powell and Joe Brevetti, both seasoned professionals. One of them a little more seasoned than the other. I remember Joe as a logging engineer at Schlumberger, so we go back pretty far back. So we'll get him to talk about his career a little bit. I'll force both of them to talk about themselves. So Heather, I'm going to start out with kind of introduce yourself a little bit and talk about Ventana and also just kind of some opening remarks, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I'm Heather Powell, and I got started in the industry in 2004 over at Chesapeake. And I started in the land department and in a very booming A&D time. And in those days, you got on a plane or in a car and you went to another office, and usually it was dark and dusty, and you dug through files, and you went back to the team and they worked out a deal. And then you got in your car, went back to that office and loaded it up with files to bring them back. So lots of hard work, lots of A&D. It's a little bit different today, but I fell in love with the business in that time. And then in 2007, I went over to Sandridge, and same thing. We were building a company and lots of A&D work, lots of traveling around and looking at files. And then from there, I went to RKI and stayed until we merged with WPX in Tulsa. And then at that time, it was 2015, and had to think about what to do next, and ended up at Ventana. So we have been going since 2016 as an acquisition machine, growing assets 1 acre at a time. And then last February, we closed a second fund with our investors. And while we're doing similar things, still focused in Oklahoma, we're looking at some bigger deals. Some of those may include operations, so changing our strategies a little bit, but still focused on growth and investments that work in today's price environment.
Awesome. Joe?
Well, a little older history than Heather. Heather, you started the same year in the patch when I actually left my first career and started Charter Oak. And as I said, as Dave mentioned, I knew Dave when he was out drilling these, like with 1,800-foot wells, Dave, down there, and like Wildcat Jim.
Yes, sir. Well, those were 3,200 feet, and then we were drilled a bunch of shallow Permian wells in Stevens County with Schlumberger shooting lots of holes.
Dave was
loading guns.
An active client there. I actually started out as a kid from New England who saw a movie about the oil patch and about Texas, and decided I wanted to go to South Texas and work in the oil patch, and moved from Connecticut to Pleasant in Texas, and got hired on with Schlumberger as an engineer, and worked all around Texas and Louisiana, a stint in Houston. So you get to walk into the offices of some of these, huge oil company buildings and go, how do they support all this overhead and these people in this big office? Worked in the Rockies before coming here, and that was a great experience learning about really remote operations and the lack of infrastructure, which even I guess still exists up there today. But in the early 2000s, I started looking at charts and realized, I think we're at the start of the next boom after a 16, 18 year bust from the, mid 80s to late 90s. And so I was able to qualify for retirement in 2004 and left Schlumberger after almost 3 decades, and started Charter Oak, and started out borrowing money. Had a great banker to buy our first field, and that got us about 24 wells and operations, and then slowly built up. And so since 2004, we now operate a little over 200 wells, maybe 220 wells in Oklahoma and Texas, mostly Oklahoma. We've drilled most of them, a lot of them verticals, Some horizontals. Pretty much about all we're doing now is horizontal, unless we need a pilot hole for something. And along the way, we tried to stay ahead of the big boys, and so we accumulated over the years about 80,000 acres, and ended up doing about a dozen sales to about 4 different public oil companies, maybe 5, that allowed us for us and our participants to pocket about $300 million, and that gave us the funds to not have to be relying on bankers and so forth.
I'm writing you down right now on my charities list, so you'll start getting some requests for charity money.
It's all in rental frac tanks right now, Dave.
Apparently, I'm on everybody's charity list, which is great. So
it's great, yes.
So I tell you why I wanted to put this segment together is most of our companies are small. We have over 1,300 companies, and most of us are little guys that I watched Charter Oak over the years build up, monetize, build up. That was always my strategy. I did very similar things that Joe's doing over, I think I started I didn't stay the full 30 years. I stayed 10 years with Texaco before I went on my own. So I started a little bit earlier in my career, but now we're 25 years later. I've done the same thing, monetized multiple times. A lot of our guys, our constituents have their family owned, kind of like all of our companies are now, the 3 on the phone, or the 3 on the Zoom call. And, they're trying to look at things that they're interested in, things that we can do with our power of being a large organization at the Alliance that can help them. That's one of the things we would like to talk to them about, some of the resources we have. And can't afford a steady team or hiring a bunch of consultants, but you certainly can ask questions of our membership. And if enough people are asking particular questions, we put together a task force and try to answer the questions. We put a task force together to try to work on the what they were calling the purge. Joe was involved in that. So we've got a lot of technical expertise. There's power in our numbers from a standpoint of bargaining for insurance and all kinds of things. So we're looking for more and more ideas to help our the smaller companies, which is basically the backbone of the Alliance. So one of the things that everybody is wanting to add, they're going to want to know what you two think is Heather, because of since you're age challenged, you don't have enough. You haven't seen as many of these cycles as a couple of other guys on the Zoom call have. But what do you see? And I'll let both of you answer this. What do you see different about this time? That's and particularly from a smaller view lens, a smaller company lens.
Well, I don't know that there's an angle that we're not getting hit with right now, right? So we've got storage issues, we've got demand issues, we've got price issues. So we're being hit. And some of those we don't have a real line in sight of when it's going to get better. For Oklahoma City, it's nice. I'm sure you guys will agree. I've tried to be more excited about the traffic on my way to work than before, being irritated. So it's nice seeing people moving around more. My kids even, I've been explaining to them some of the issues going on, and when we're out in the backyard playing, they're screaming with excitement when they see a Southwest plane. So we're very excited to see planes moving now, and so it's different. I think the industry as a whole is going to be different, probably forever after this. But I think there's still going to be a lot of jobs. It just may look different than it did before. Probably less towers with hundreds of people, like Joe mentioned. But I think as companies go through distress or bankruptcies or restructuring, you're going to see more companies opening up. Somebody's going to buy that business. And then people are going to do like the three of us have done and start businesses. So where you have a team of engineers in-house, maybe you rely on consultants more than you did before. So that's definitely something I learned at RKI with Ronnie, whether we used consultants to a certain point, and then whenever it was time to bring them in-house, everybody was try before you buy. So come on as a consultant to hire. So I think that was a really good thing, and I think we'll see more of that as well.
You know, that's a great thought. The try before you buy. I like that line. That's a great thought because we have a great huge amount of people that have been displaced, and maybe maybe they don't land immediately with a company, but keep your skills, hone your skills, come in. Maybe we have to be a little bit more modest about what obviously we're not. A lot of people are not going to make what they made before, so they're going to be under where they were at, like underutilized probably, but be willing to redevelop those skills. Like, for example, a geologist may have to resharpen their geotech type skills because they were working on larger scale projects that they had geotech support, and they may have to kind of rekindle the old spirit of looking for oil.
Absolutely.
How would you think about that, Joe?
Well, I agree completely with what both you, Dave, and Heather have said. One of the differences we're probably going to see in this downturn is, unlike previous downturns where we had really shallow decline wells, that's probably why it took 16, 18 years to get out of the downturn of the 80s and 90s, is the wells that have come online in the last few years, they have very steep declines. I think I read that there's a couple of million barrels a day or more in the U.S. that wasn't even on production a little over a year ago. So with this steep a decline, I think we're gonna come out of this a lot faster than before. So a point where you're saying about a lot of people that are presently displaced and maybe will go into the consulting ranks, they're going to be needed. There are probably less people on payroll for a lot of companies, and I think a lot of us, like Charter Oak included, have learned to be able to do a lot with subcontractors and with the service and providers and vendors. So I see a quick turnaround. Now, quick's a relative term. Is that next year or maybe early 22? But it's going to happen.
You know what? What price do you think? We're actually a dominant gas phase producer, but let's talk about what price of oil causes the Permian to start drilling again, start being robust again.
I don't know, maybe Heather's a little more familiar with the Permian. I'm not really familiar with the Permian, but I do look at about every completion in Oklahoma. And I can say that from people I've talked to and what we see is even watching your P's and Q's and getting your costs in line, I don't see people getting too excited until prices get over 40, probably into that 40 to 50 range again. And I'm sure we'll get to discussing capital availability later on, but it's going to be tough to attract new outside capital until you see a significant run up in pricing. And I mean significant, like $60 or $80 a barrel on oil.
Yeah, I mentioned Permian because they're kind of the canary in the coal mine. They're going to be the first movers. Heather, what do you think? Maybe answer the question more from Oklahoma's perspective.
From Oklahoma's, I mean, my friend Joe here was talking about some activity he's got planned here in the near term, and I've talked to other peers as well that I think this 40 has happened a little quicker than some of us thought. We're back up to this level, which is exciting. So I think you'll see some activity. Now, are we going to have all of our rigs back up in the air? Probably not, but at 40 plus, depending on what everybody's hedge program looks like and what the storage situation looks like, I think you're going to see people start completing some wells, and the steep decline is a different thing than we had the last time. So we will probably see folks start bringing on production based on their different programs. So I think it'll be sooner rather than later, but I think it'll be a slow uptick here as we watch prices and demand and storage.
Well, that kind of leads me to a question that I definitely want to hear what you guys say as to answer. So obviously, with the downturn in the drilling in the Permian, the associated gas is going to drop off like a rock, and it's going to. In my opinion, I think I'm a little bit more bullish on gas than I am on oil. Oil is just too geopolitically driven right now. So, what do you guys? What are your thoughts on the natural gas market? I mean, here at roughly $1.80 in the summer month, that doesn't sound all that bad to me. But of course, we've suffered with sub dollar in the summers and recently. So, what do you think?
Well, Dave, I'll jump in first because we actually just put out a proposal a couple weeks ago for a gas recompletion, moving up hole and a well out in the Oklahoma Panhandle that we purchased because it had a pretty nice Morrow gas zone that's produced in the general area, but not anywhere nearby. Here's the issue on gas, and I think everybody out there has seen this, is we're hammered with fees. And, you know, Dave, you and I have talked about it. You know, we've had conversations here. We're sadly having to take one company to the OCC on a rate case. So, you know, it's a shame to have to sell rich gas that should be, like you said, bringing close to $2, and you get your net check and there's $1 something in fees and you're getting 20 to 50 cents, you know, an MCF equivalent. So I think that's going to hurt the gas recovery. Now, you know, maybe, you know, I'm looking at it from a biased viewpoint, but I think last month, the first time ever in my history, I saw negative ethane. We got 1 to 3 cents a gallon deducted from our checks for the ethane. So, yeah, gas is going to be recovered because of the oil coming down and the associated gas, and we're moving to a electrified environment that we're going to have to generate more power from natural gas. So maybe at some point we'll see the fees get in line and we'll be able to make some money.
You know, that's a great thought, Joe. And before Heather answers the question too, I have really been talking to the governor a lot about this. He realizes that the giant market share that was gifted away from natural gas to subsidized alternative energies. And he realizes this, it's real jobs and people that pay and keep their money here in the state. So from a standpoint of anything that they can help us with, they are. That's different than it's been in the past. So we're going to applaud that we have a business guy in the governor's seat. There's various other things, especially, you know, I've actually been on the governor's task force working on the bounce back program where we're really aimed at industries that are verticals to use natural gas or combined cycle generated electricity from natural gas. So we have made everybody that will listen aware of the situation. So Heather, what do you think? When do you drill a gas well?
Yeah, I completely agree with both of your sentiments on the fees. It's a real killer, and we're feeling that as well. But on the flip side, like you said, there's a lot less political issues associated with the gas. So for Ventana, we've looked at, you know, we spent 2 years looking at zero gas deals. And I think right now we probably have 10 projects we're looking at that are gas driven, that we're evaluating and have a real serious interest in balancing that out. So I think with a lot of things, we don't want to be all in on just oil, and we don't want to be all in on just natural gas, but it does seem a little bit flatter and more predictable than oil is right now.
What gets people excited in Oklahoma and it gets them fired up is the fact that we appear to most of like if we were a country, we appear to be a third world country where our raw materials the value is added in another state because we shipped our gas or our electricity generated by gas out of the state. So attracting users here, vertical users of our product, that's got to be paramount. And I can tell you that our lieutenant governor and governor are both all over it. And so that was my contribution. Now, we had so many smart people on that task force. I could tell you from every industry, but I certainly wanted them to understand we're kind of the guys that are paying the bills. We need some help, and especially our smaller producers. We've actually talked to we had some good conversations with OG&E and other providers. Those fixed fees, the metered fees, you look at your electricity, you look at your bill, and you have all these fixed fees, and then variable is what it is, right? But the fixed fees are capital recovery in general is how they. And I'm sitting there looking at my window right now and seeing what I don't think is brand new distribution, and surely they've got their money back from that. So we'd like for some help from them. But they have been talking to us, which is better than just shutting the door in our face. So that's good. They realize that that variable load goes away if they don't help us out with some of these fixed costs. Kind of shifting a little bit, and Joe alluded to it, and I think probably everybody on the phone wants to hear what you think about capital sources. I'll kind of back clean up and tell you what I've found in recent times. But what do you guys think, Heather? It sounds like you got a second fund put together. Kind of timing has a lot to do with the successful outcome of a rain dance. Is timing. So you did getting your capital under your belt.
It was humbling, actually, for us. The first, as all of us have been through the ropes of trying to raise money and realizing how gruesome and difficult that can be, especially your first time where you don't have a big success story behind you. So raising funds for Ventana 1 was a little different than 2, but coming off the cusp of building a, pretty successful first company, we had that story to go off of when raising funds for number 2. But it was just like at the cusp of the ESG movement, and a lot of investors, this is pre-COVID, Saudi Russia issues, but there was a lot of investors pulling out because of environmental concerns. So it was humbling going through the ranks of raising money. We did successfully raise our second fund, but it wasn't quite, so easy a caveman could do it. Like we maybe went into it thinking it would be. And then as we all know with, bank financing is also tough when we've got the price changes and things we're all experiencing now. So making sure we're communicating with our bankers and talking about what type of assets make sense to them and make sense to us. I think there is still capital available, but you can't just push an easy button and it all just falls in your lap. So I think it's important to communicate and understand what types of investors are interested in oil and gas, who aren't, and don't waste your time on those type of calls. And then also partnering with a good bank and having good lines of communication of what they're willing to do and not willing to do, so you have good synergies and a good fit.
Joe, what's your thoughts on capital?
Dave, this is a tough question, and this is my opinion is that this is going to restrain our recovery. The big companies, the public companies, are going to have their own issues. Companies like ourselves have historically been with, private investors and participants in what pretty much now is called family offices. And a lot of these family offices now had their background from oil. Their fortunes were made early on in oil, and now they're past their third and into their fourth generation. And it's, maybe ESG concerns, or maybe it's just that it hasn't been very profitable the last few years. But a lot of people don't seem to have concerns about putting money into oil. I think DRW had a podcast with Bill Bailey, who threw out a number that there's $46 trillion now that won't go into oil and gas right now, investments. So this is certainly going to be an issue coming out. However, I think we can show, I think as an industry, we're going to show that when it's profitable again, and I think it will be very soon, money will come in. You know, if an investor can make money drilling, completing oil and gas wells, they're going to be back in, and we can show that we're going to do it in an environmentally sensitive manner.
Well, it's yield, right? So there's no flight to anywhere that's going to provide a yield like, so like some of the oil and gas investments can. So I actually am going to echo that. I think that the money comes back in, and it actually, some capitulation is starting to happen from the seller standpoint, and that is going to make some very, very compelling projects for investors. And I'm seeing it. I would consider everybody investing right now as early movers and steel. And it's the try to catch the falling knife question of trying to pick the bottom. You cannot pick the bottom ever. Anybody that's ever been a trader of anything, especially commodity, knows you cannot pick the high and you cannot pick the low. So it's you just look fundamentally at some of these acquisitions. I would think that, and Heather probably has a real good pulse on this, but you're looking at PDP PV 20 to 25 on the current strip is pretty much, you can buy almost anything for that. Regardless of upside, it really gets discounted if it's just if you're just clipping coupons and there's no upside. Some of our we're picking up a few questions on the chat line that I certainly want. We have folks that are prolifically submitting questions, so I don't want to. One of the questions that they are asking is, and I think it was from an earlier comment that about they wanted to know about people. I got the human cost and capital, project management firms. Do we see that starting to thrive? Like, hey, I need somebody to come in and build this system for these wells. I can't afford the engineers to keep them on staff. It's a little bit of that try before you buy concept that Heather threw out, but you see that kind of. Every time I see a downturn in this business, I see hundreds. One company goes down and 50 pop up. I mean, that's what I love about this industry. The people are so resilient. And I know that word gets used a lot, but look, folks, we are no stranger to adversity. No, not at all. And so every time we see something, it's just, okay, well, that just means we've got to work this much harder and find another way. And this industry just does. So what do you think? What do you think? Do you see lots of little companies popping up, and maybe it's family money? They had to start out with a little bit, but what do we tell them now that they've got, say they've got their 10 or 15 wells and they're working hard, and what do they do next? Where do they get their money and family off?
One of our famous sayings at the office, just to tee Joe up here, is, what would Joe do? So we say that a lot. So we get some questions from investors, and I'll go look at Greg, and we'll both just look at each other and say, what would Joe do? And so we call Joe, and he's got some pretty great ideas. So I think he should kick this one off.
Heather or TWC, you are way too kind. Trust me, we make as many mistakes or more than we do right. So it's kind of a numbers game, like how many times you get up at bat before you have a hit even, and then how few are actually home runs out of there. Yes, total agreement again with you and Dave that you got to be out there, keeping your face in front of everyone, ahead of the herd. And from the operator side, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities. For example, Ventana, Charter Oak buys a package of wells. We don't want to keep them all. I mean, there's some things that we want to take that we're going to do things with. There's others not in an area that's a fit for us, and yet there's going to be a fit for someone. And I see we see the industry going bipolar. It's probably the technical term is bimodal, that you're going to have companies that are out there doing, drilling these multi-million-dollar laterals, but you're also going to have companies that it may have been a person who was a pumper for XYZ and he got early retired or displaced. And he says, hey, I could take over these 20 wells and they're only a barrel or two a day, but we're going to do everything ourselves. So we're going to make this work, and they'll make money at it. I think there's going to be tremendous opportunities on the service side. There's a lot of equipment being sold right now for pennies on the dollar. And you're going to have someone say who worked for, I don't know, I'll throw out a water transfer company. And the 10 water transfer companies in the state are now down to say 3 or 4. And yet when the activity picks up, who transfers the water for a frac job? Well, now here's an opportunity. Somebody gets into this business for, probably just a five-figure number, and maybe family, friends, a good banker loans it to him. He's got laid flat pipe and a couple of trucks and pumps, and he's out there helping now to provide these services. So there is going to be all types of opportunities for those people that are out there and wanting to take advantage.
That's something we don't talk about much, but it's the barrier of entry is lowered significantly. So there's a lot of people that are, I don't think everybody's lining up to pivot to be in the oil and gas business, but there's a few smart people going, look at the barrier of entry is low, much, much lower. I can buy, there's so many great places, marketplaces like EnergyNet and places where you can be in this business. There's so many people. We rank everything by operated production because that's kind of how the data is. But there's so many people. There's some pretty large oil and gas investors that you've never heard of that are vested in, own anywhere from a fractional interest to an eighth of tons of wells. I have a bunch. I've got that. Heather has a bunch. Joe, you're more of a. I consider myself more of an operator, and most of my production was operated throughout my career. But I've had some good luck with good partners, and it's about good partners.
Completely agree.
If you can get some guys that are they're not living out of the cash register, and the cash register is your COPUS overhead.
Mm-hmm.
And these things escalated. This unintended consequence of 1989 AAPL, JOA escalators that escalated over 25 years, and now every well out there has $1,400 or $1,500 of COPUS overhead.
Right.
But, no one wants to give it up. So it's just it's that in working with I've drilled a lot of wells. I used to take deals off the street from geologists here in town. I always had kind of a line of guys that, hey, if you're working on something, come by and show me. And I think that's going to come back. There's a tax advantage as an individual to be in the oil and gas business and take those write-offs in the year incurred. And so I think that's I want to ask this question because I ask this question a lot because it's one of my biggest concerns is our younger people, especially our younger technical people leaving our business. Frankly, this is some of them, it's their first significant downturn. And they just, it's a lot to ask of a young person that, hey, I could just go over here and be a chemical engineer, or I can go over here and buy rent houses or whatever. I can pivot away from this. It's just too hard. And how do we keep those people involved, and what do we tell them during times like this?
I think this is, I think it's a good reality check too. I think as everybody on the three of us know, this oil and gas is a hustle. When it's good, it's really good. And when it's bad, it's really bad. So I think in looking at the silver lining, there is good in seeing some hard times. My first mentor, it took me a long time to understand what he meant. But he said the best thing that would ever happen to me is to go completely broke. I was really irritated with that, and I thought that was terrible advice. But I get it. I get what he means now. So I think to be hungry for your job and what you do or passionate about it is really important. And I think it's really cool, the things that I've seen just in the past couple of months of what people are doing. I think I have my prop back here, but here's an example of something.
Yeah, love those guys.
Amazing. This is a young person. Jonathan Jordan is has revamped his whole facility to be able to produce the stuff, which we love it. We use it here at the office. I've loved seeing EnergyNet and Pinnacle kind of have their strategic alliance. It's talking, doing the things that we've been talking about here. One's amazing at engineering and one's amazing at A&D, and they've joined forces instead of adding those at their particular shops. It's what we do here at Ventana. We partner with AmShot, a local business, for IT. I know Petroleum Alliance uses them as well. We partner with Crescent for operations. I talk to those guys almost every day. So I think Bank of Oklahoma, we partner with those guys, talk to them very frequently. So I think those of us that love this and want to stay in it, we're going to find ways to do it, whether it's making sanitizer or partnering with groups that like Joe and I, he wants to do a certain thing. We love, non-op and finding ways that deals work in partnership will be the make or break. But I think that's what the young people have to decide. Are you willing to do what it takes? I mean, there's times that I've gone out to the field to, run title after having a really fancy job before in a big tower. I've settled lots of surface damages and right-of-ways and water wells. Those are not glamorous jobs, but guess what? I met all of the landowners. And, as an engineer going out to the field, I tell a lot of young guys that, you need to be out in the field for a while. And sometimes people put their nose up at that stuff. I don't think you two would disagree that that's something that's important for all of us to be out in the field and having real world experiences. So I think the young people will have to learn to do some hard work during this time and will either love it or hate it. And I think that's good. You'll decide, how much you love this industry and how much of an abuse junkie that you are, and you'll stay.
Well, we've all known that adversity does, make us tougher, right?
Yeah.
And, there's a group of us that had worked with a mentoring program back a couple of years ago, as there was a lot of younger people getting displaced, and it was kind of an interdisciplinary, SPE and OCGS and the Oklahoma City PL, the OCPL was involved, and we had a bunch of different speakers from all different disciplines, including accounting and including the legal profession who worked oil and gas. So there is a lot of future. You got to think outside of the box. And one of the slides that I'd like to show, that I showed to the young people, and there was a few people even not so young in there, was that some of the wealthiest oil people in the world went through some tremendous adversity, and there's several books to read, but like The Greatest Gamblers, which is an OU Press book that you can find it online for free, is by Ruth Sheldon Knowles. Unbelievable adversity. The Big Rich, which was the 4 big Texas oil families, I think that was by Brian Burrow. They went through, these guys were busted multiple times. And then they came back billionaires. So, and then another one, very Oklahoma oriented, of course, is the story of Lloyd Noble. Again, imagine being a drilling contractor back, during the Depression. So, but he started taking interest in wells, and then, of course, built up a production company that became world class. So, yes, I encourage everybody, read those stories and take advantage of these times, because you really make your money in these bad times. You just don't get to cash the checks until the times get better.
You read that? Yeah, that's a great thought. Lloyd Noble and kind of a group of Ardmore oil workers went over. There's a book written called The Secret of Sherwood Forest, and they're actually making a kind of a documentary and maybe a movie about it. They actually found a high condensate field in the Sherwood Forest, and it's attributed to how the Brits won the air war over Europe because of the fuel we had. And the Germans looked for that field the entire war, trying to destroy it. So we have lots of heroes. I'm going to wrap it up because we run out. I could talk all day with these two. what we want everybody to know that we have resources at the Petroleum Alliance. This is your organization. This is the organization for oil and gas in Oklahoma. We have far more smaller companies than larger companies, and for the people that think this isn't their place, that's just inaccurate. And so we want those people. We want our people that are members now to reach out and to staff and see if we can help with your questions. And like I said, we will immediately move if enough people are wanting a particular item. One of them could be working with our midstream members on elegant solutions for the current cost structure for natural gas in our state. That would be a good one. So we want the people that aren't members of our organization. We want you to be, if you're a non-operated operator or the largest operator in the state. We're not differentiating. This is a one company, one vote alliance. So we want those people, and we want you guys to join back with us. So with that, I want to thank both Heather and Joe. Everybody, this was very popular. A bunch of people wanted to be on this because they wanted to hear from you two guys, both very successful. And excited to have you. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.